The specific gray light of a late November Seattle morning filtered through the guest room blinds. Outside, a persistent drizzle coated everything in a damp sheen, from the neighbors' rooftops to the last stubborn leaves clinging to the maple trees. The air inside my parents', Eleanor and Richard's house in the quiet Bellevue suburbs was unnervingly still, carrying only the faint, lingering scent of roast turkey and pumpkin pie from last night's boisterous Thanksgiving feast. I'm Ethan Hayes, software developer, the stable one, the responsible son. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the groggy aftermath of a night spent on a too-soft mattress after too much food. Reaching for my phone on the nightstand was almost muscle memory. Check work emails, scan and tech news headlines, quick glance at the bank balance, and the banking app opened. A number blinked back at me. $4.87. My heart skipped. A glitch, definitely. Had to be. I hit the refresh icon. The number stayed put. Refreshed again. Still $4.87. My breathing hitched. Impossible. Just last night, before the chaos of dinner began, I'd checked. It was over $22,000. $22,150.62 to be exact. My entire savings. Every cent painstakingly scraped together from a year of grinding out freelance projects on nights and weekends after getting laid off from my previous job. It was my safety net, my fresh start fund. A chill spread through my chest, colder than the damp air outside. No way. This had to be a mistake. I threw off the covers, pulling on clothes with fumbling fingers. I needed to get downstairs. Needed coffee. Needed to see the numbers on a real computer screen. Maybe the app was just freaking out. But the morning quiet downstairs was already broken. In the kitchen, my sister, Olivia, Liv as everyone called her, leaned against the granite countertop, casually scrolling through her phone. Her husband, Mark, stood by the window, coffee mug in hand, gazing out at the rain with that familiar, infuriatingly smug half-grin plastered on his face. The atmosphere between them felt normal. Too normal. Liv? Mark? My voice came out hoarse. My savings account... What happened? It's practically empty. Liv glanced up, her expression shifting to mild annoyance, as if I'd interrupted something important. Oh, that? She shrugged, a dismissive little lift of her shoulder. Relax, Ethan. We needed it. I blinked, trying to process her words. Needed it? You needed it? Yeah, Mark chimed in, turning from the window, the smirk now a full-fledged grin. Had to cover the lease payment on the Lexus this month, plus the HOA fees kicked in. You know how Mrs. Henderson next door watches everyone. Gotta keep up appearances. He took a sip of his coffee like he was discussing the weather. Heat rushed to my face. Keep up appearances? With my money? $22,000? My voice trembled, a mixture of disbelief and rising fury. What did you do? Just then, my mother, Eleanor, bustled in from the living room, carrying a stack of dirty dessert plates from the night before. Ethan, honey, what's all the commotion? Mom! Liv and Mark! They took all my savings! I practically yelled, jabbing a finger towards them. Mom set the plates down with a clatter and sighed. That long, suffering sigh I knew all too well, the one reserved for when I was being oversensitive or dramatic. Oh, Ethan, don't make a scene. Liv and Mark were just in a tight spot. You've got that great tech job, no mortgage, no kids. You're fine. She turned to Liv with a sympathetic look. Right, sweetie? My father, Richard, appeared in the doorway, the morning paper tucked under his arm. He peered at me over his reading glasses. That's right, he grunted. You're the stable one in the family. This is just family helping family. Stop making such a fuss. I stared, speechless, from one face to the next. The casualness, the entitlement, the utter lack of remorse or even surprise. They acted like this was their right, like the money I'd bled for was just a communal pot they could dip into whenever they pleased. Family helping family? I echoed. My voice choked with anger and a sickening wave of betrayal. This isn't help. This is theft. How did you even get into my account? Liv rolled her eyes. You logged into Mom and Dad's computer yesterday to check something, remember? Guess you didn't log out properly. Honestly, Ethan, it's kind of your own fault. My fault? The rage boiled inside me, but the words wouldn't come. It felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. My own family, all four of them, standing there looking at me like I was the unreasonable one for being upset that my entire life savings had just vanished. There was nothing left to say. Wordlessly, I turned and walked away, heading back upstairs. My mother's voice trailed after me. "Ethan, where are you going? Don't be like this. Let's talk about it reasonably." I didn't answer. I grabbed the small overnight bag I'd brought, stuffing my few things back inside with shaking hands. Threw on my rain jacket, marched back downstairs, past the kitchen where they still stood, probably expecting me to eventually calm down and accept this, just like I always did. Not this time. I yanked open the front door and stepped out into the cold, damp Seattle morning. The drizzle was heavier now, almost rain. I slammed the door shut behind me, leaving the house, leaving their dismissive faces, leaving the crushing weight of their betrayal churning in my gut. The tires hissed on the wet pavement as I drove, aimlessly navigating the rain-slicked streets branching away from my parents' neighborhood. Bellevue faded into the blur of freeways heading towards Seattle, though I had no destination in mind. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the image of Liv's dismissive shrug and Mark's smug grin burned into my retinas. $4.87. The number echoed in my head like a gunshot. My phone buzzed in the center console. I ignored it. Probably Mom trying to smooth things over, or Liv, ready to unleash a guilt trip. It buzzed again. Reluctantly, I glanced at the caller ID. Chloe, my cousin. I let it ring a few more times before hitting the hands-free button. "Ethan?" Her voice was tentative. "Hey, I saw you peel out of there like a bat out of hell. Everything okay?" "No, Chloe, not even close." My voice was flat, tight, a sigh on the other end. "Let me guess. Liv and Mark?" Silence. I couldn't form the words yet. "What did they do this time?" She pressed gently. She'd seen glimpses of their behavior over the years, the subtle digs, the constant borrowing. A raw, choked sound escaped my throat. They cleaned out my savings account, Chloe. All of it. 22 grand. A sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God, Ethan, all of it. That's horrible. That's not just in a tight spot horrible. That's..." She trailed off, searching for the right word. "That's not okay, Ethan. Seriously, not okay." Her simple, unequivocal validation was a small, unexpected comfort in the storm raging inside me. "Yeah, I managed. Tell them that. Look, pull over somewhere when you can, okay? Get some coffee. Breathe." "Maybe. Well, I'll call you later." I mumbled and disconnected, but breathing felt impossible. My mind was racing, replaying not just the scene in the kitchen, but years of smaller incidents, a tapestry of entitlement woven with threads of guilt and obligation. This wasn't the first time Liv and Mark had treated me like their personal ATM, just the most blatant, the most devastating. It had started small years ago. Liv forgot to pay her cell phone bill. I covered it to stop the annoying calls from the provider reaching Mom. Then Mark had one of his brilliant startup ideas, some app that was going to revolutionize something. He needed a small loan to get it off the ground, $5,000. He swore he'd pay it back in 6 months with interest. That was 3 years ago. The startup fizzled and the money vanished like smoke, never mentioned again unless I brought it up, which immediately branded me as petty and unsupportive. Then there were the kids' expenses. Their daughter, my niece, needed braces. Guess who got asked to help out? Last summer, it was an expensive coding camp. Liv hadn't even asked. She just forwarded me the invoice with a note. "Figured you'd want to chip in for this." The smiley face felt like a twist of the knife. Each time I'd paid, telling myself it was for my niece, not for them. And my parents? They weren't just bystanders, they were enablers in chief. Eleanor's voice, sweet but laced with steel. "Ethan, honey, you're so fortunate. You don't have the struggles your sister does. God gave you ease so you could share it." Or Richard gruffly chiming in, "Family looks after its own, son." "We didn't raise you to be selfish." Their words always conveniently ignored the year I was struggling, the year after the layoff when I was living off ramen and freelance gigs booked at 2 a.m., pouring every spare cent and waking moment into rebuilding my career and savings. I remembered mentioning how tight things were back then, how I had to cancel a planned trip. Mama just patted my hand and said, "Oh, you'll bounce back. You're smart." Dad had grunted something about tightening my belt. My struggles were temporary inconveniences. Liv and Mark's were apparently permanent states of emergency requiring my constant financial intervention. The memory of Liv's laugh from just 2 weeks ago surfaced, sharp and ugly. We'd been talking about Christmas plans. "Better bring that tech money bonus, Ethan," she'd chirped. "Christmas is expensive, you know." Mark had grinned beside her. I'd laughed it off as a bad joke. Now, It felt sinister, calculated. Had they been planning this even then? A sliver of the old guilt tried to surface. Maybe they really were desperate? Maybe I should have offered help sooner? But the sheer scale of the theft, the casual cruelty of their dismissal smothered it. This wasn't a cry for help. This was a heist. My phone rang again later that afternoon as I sat parked by Lake Washington watching the gray water churn under the relentless drizzle. Unknown number. I almost declined, but something made me answer. "Ethan?" The voice was hesitant female. "Yeah? Who's this?" It's Sophia, Mark's sister." I stiffened. Sophia and I weren't close, just polite exchanges at family gatherings. Why was she calling me? "Listen," she said, her voice low, rushed. I probably shouldn't be calling you, and I don't really know anything for sure, but..." She paused, taking a breath. "Mark's been really weird lately, stressed, about money, saying some strange stuff." A cold feeling crept up my spine. What kind of stuff? "Just complaining a lot about being broke. And, well, he mentioned you a couple of times. How well you're doing with your tech job." Another hesitation. "He made some comment. Something like you were so loaded you probably wouldn't even miss it if..." Look, I don't know what he meant, maybe nothing. But hearing Liv this morning trying to downplay things, I just got a bad feeling. She sounded genuinely conflicted. "I just wanted to say, be careful, okay? Watch yourself." And then, before I could respond, she said, "I gotta go." And the line went dead. I stared at my phone, Sophia's nervous words echoing in my ears. Wouldn't even miss it. It wasn't a spontaneous act of desperation fueled by Thanksgiving wine. It felt colder now, more deliberate. Mark complaining, Mark eyeing my success, Liv forwarding invoices, Mom and Dad providing philosophical cover. It was a pattern, a system, and I wasn't family. I was the Mark. The last vestiges of guilt evaporated, replaced by a hard, cold certainty. The shock was wearing off, coalescing into a resolve I hadn't felt before. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my trust, my history, my willingness to believe the best of them, and thrown it all away for a Lexus payment and HOA fees. This wasn't just going to be swept under the rug. Not this time. 3 days passed in a blur of numb disbelief and simmering anger. I'd driven north, crossing the Mukilteo ferry, and retreated to the small rustic cabin I sometimes rented on Whidbey Island. Surrounded by towering pines and the scent of damp earth, the isolation was a welcome shield. My phone had been buzzing intermittently. Ignored calls from my parents, a string of increasingly frantic texts from Liv. But mostly I'd let the silence of the woods be my only companion. I needed to think, needed to process the sheer audacity of what they'd done. Then on the fourth morning, as I was nursing a mug of coffee and staring out at the gray, choppy waters of Puget Sound, the phone rang again. "Live against my better judgment," I answered, keeping my voice deliberately flat. "What do you want, Liv?" "Ethan! Oh, thank God you picked up!" Her voice was artificially bright, laced with an undercurrent of panic. "I've been so worried. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine. What? Doctor? You. Want?" I repeated, spacing out the words. A slight pause, then the fake cheer evaporated. "Look, Ethan, we have a problem. A big one." She took a shaky breath. "The power company, Cascade Natural Gas, they came by yesterday. Left a final shut-off notice. We're way behind, apparently." I stayed silent, listening to the crackle on the line, the sound of rain drumming softly on the cabin roof. They said if we don't pay the outstanding balance by Monday, they're cutting us off. Like, completely off. No heat, no lights, nothing. Her voice rose in pitch. "The kids, Ethan. Think about the kids." Another silence. I could picture her perfectly, pacing her overly decorated living room, running a hand through her hair, dialing up the melodrama. "So?" I finally asked, my voice devoid of inflection. "So," she sputtered. "So we need your help. Obviously. We just need enough to cover the bill, get them off our backs. Just until Mark gets his next commission check, I swear." A short, bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "My help?" I asked, the words dripping with sarcasm. "You drained $22,000 from my savings account 4 days ago, and now you're calling me to bail you out of a utility bill?" It wasn't just for us, Ethan, she snapped, the victim act dissolving instantly into defensiveness. God, why are you always like this? We had to help Mom and Dad too, okay? My grip tightened on the coffee mug. Oh yeah? Help them how? Well, remember Dad needed that down payment for his new car last month? The Subaru. Where did you think that came from? We helped pitch in, she said, as if this somehow justified everything. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sophia's warning, my parents' immediate, unwavering defense of Liv and Mark. They weren't just enabling, they were benefiting, directly, from my stolen money. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously quiet now. You used my savings, money you took without asking, to help pay for Dad's new car. We all agreed it was necessary. He needed reliable transportation. Did I agree, Liv? Did anyone bother to ask me? We didn't think you'd mind. You always help out. You're the stable one, the one who can handle it. Honestly, Ethan, that's what you're for, right? There it was, the line that summed up my entire existence in their eyes. That's what you're for. Not a brother, not a son. A resource, a backup plan, a safety net they felt entitled to cut whenever they pleased. The last flicker of hesitation, of familial obligation, died within me, leaving behind something cold and hard. No, Liv, I said, the flatness back in my voice. Not anymore. What? Ethan, don't be like... I hung up. I stood there for a long moment staring out at the rain-lashed trees, the phone heavy in my hand. The anger wasn't hot anymore. It felt like ice spreading through my veins. The betrayal wasn't just about the money now. It was about the years of manipulation, the casual disregard, the fundamental lack of respect. It was about my own parents being complicit in the theft. They thought I was just a resource? Fine. Resources have limits. And they had just blown past mine. My resolve solidified. This wasn't going to be resolved with tearful phone calls or tense family dinners. This needed consequences. Real ones. I needed proof. I needed documentation. I needed a lawyer. A week crawled by. I'd left the isolation of Whidbey Island and found a short-term furnished rental closer to Seattle. A sterile, anonymous place that suited my current need for disconnection. I'd had an initial preliminary consultation with a lawyer specializing in financial fraud. Her advice was clear. Document everything, gather concrete evidence, and avoid direct confrontation until we had a solid case. My anger had cooled, settling into a grim, methodical resolve. Sophia's warning call, Liv's brazen demand for more money, the lawyer's pragmatic counsel. It all pointed in one direction. Then came the inevitable call. My mother, Eleanor. Her voice on the phone was syrupy sweet, dripping with manufactured concern. Ethan, darling, how are you holding up? We've all been so terribly worried about you. I'm managing, Mom, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Oh, good. A pause heavy with unspoken manipulation. Listen, sweetheart, this tension, it's just dreadful for the family. None of us are sleeping well. Your father's beside himself. Liar. Dad was probably just annoyed his routine was disrupted. Can't we all just sit down together like adults? Maybe you could come over for dinner tonight. Just us. We need to clear the air, talk this through properly. Clear the air, right? More like clear their conscience by convincing me I was the problem. I knew exactly what this was. Intervention, guilt trip edition. An ambush designed to wear me down, appeal to my sense of family obligation, and make this whole $22,000 problem disappear without any inconvenient consequences for them. But the lawyer's advice echoed. Document everything. An idea sparked. Okay, Mom, I said, injecting a note of weary resignation into my voice. Dinner sounds fine. I'll be there around 7. Before leaving my rental, I took out my phone, opened the discreet voice recording app I sometimes use for work meetings, tested it, set it to record silently, activated by a subtle tap sequence, the screen remaining dark. I slipped the phone into my inside jacket pocket, microphone angled outwards. If they wanted to talk, fine, we'd talk. And I'd have a record of every self-serving, manipulative word. Walking into my parents' house felt like stepping into a different climate zone. The air was thick, heavy with resentment disguised as strained politeness. Mom fluttered around nervously, asking if I wanted a drink, her eyes darting towards me constantly. Dad sat stonily in his usual armchair, pretending to be engrossed in a financial news channel, but the stiff set of his shoulders betrayed him. Liv was perched on the edge of the sofa, arms crossed tightly, radiating hostility. Mark lounged beside her, attempting an air of boredom, but his eyes tracked my every move. Dinner was an excruciating affair, punctuated by long silences and forced small talk about weather and traffic. After the plates were cleared, by Mom naturally, Eleanor took a deep breath, signaling the start of the main event. She sat opposite me at the dining table, folding her hands primly. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft, pleading, "we need to understand why you're reacting this way, why you're being so cold, so distant." "Here we go." Liv jumped in immediately. "We already explained, Ethan. We were desperate. You weren't answering your phone." "Desperate enough to wipe out my entire savings?" I asked quietly, making sure my voice was clear for the recording. Mark leaned forward, trying for a man-to-man approach. "Look, man, it was just borrowing. A misunderstanding. You make good money in that tech bubble, you'll make it back. Why make such a big deal out of it?" "A big deal?" I repeated, letting the question hang in the air. Dad finally lowered his imaginary newspaper shield. "You're tearing this family apart, Ethan, over money. Is that what's really important here?" "It wasn't just money, Dad," I said, meeting his gaze. "It was trust." "Oh, sweetheart," Mom interjected, her voice quivering slightly. "We never ever meant to hurt you. We assumed you'd understand, that you'd want to help. You always have before." Her eyes welled up, the practiced tears of a master manipulator. Not once. Not a single word of apology. Not an ounce of accountability. Just justifications, blame-shifting, and appeals to a sense of familial duty they themselves had trampled. Time for my part. Keeping my voice level, I started asking questions, letting them dig their own graves. Just so I'm clear," I began, looking at Mom, "you felt it was acceptable for Liv and Mark to access my private bank account and transferred $22,000 without my permission?" She flustered. "Well, access and transfer sound so formal. They needed help, Ethan, and you weren't—" "Okay." I turned to Mark. "And you consider taking that amount without asking, knowing you still owe me $5,000 from 3 years ago, as just borrowing?" He shifted uncomfortably, losing some of his swagger. That business loan was different. This was a family emergency." "An emergency involving HOA fees and a Lexus lease?" I clarified. I looked at Liv. "And you genuinely believe the primary issue here is that I didn't log out of a computer properly?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "Yes. If you were more careful with your information, maybe this wouldn't have happened. You need to take some responsibility, too." Perfect. Denial, justification, victim blaming, lack of remorse, all recorded. I slowly pushed my chair back and stood up. The movement seemed to startle them. "Okay," I said calmly. The contrast between my outward composure and the icy rage solidifying inside me was stark. "I think I understand everyone's position now." I looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes briefly. They looked back with a mixture of defiance, confusion, and maybe a dawning unease at my lack of expected emotional outburst. Perhaps they thought they had won, that I was finally caving. "I need to go," I stated simply. "But Ethan, we haven't finished talking," Mom protested, starting to rise. "No," I said, cutting her off gently but with unmistakable finality. I think we have. I have everything I need to think about now." Without another word, I turned and walked towards the front door, acutely aware of their stunned silence behind me. I stepped out into the cool night air, reached into my pocket, and discreetly stopped the recording. Phase 1 of gathering evidence was complete. Armed with the recording and copies of my bank records, I felt a shift within me. The hurt and confusion had finally burned away, leaving behind a chilling clarity. My lawyer had confirmed the recording was admissible, especially as Washington is a two-party consent state for private conversations. But this family meeting could arguably be seen differently, and their denials on record were powerful regardless. More importantly, the financial trail was undeniable evidence of fraud. It was time. I didn't give them advance warning this time. One evening, about 3 days after the recorded talk, I drove back to my parents' house. I walked up the driveway, ignoring the sudden twitch of the living room curtains, and rang the doorbell, my tablet case clutched firmly in my hand. Mark opened the door, surprise quickly morphing into annoyance. Ethan, what do you want now? I'm here to finalize our discussion about the money, I said evenly, stepping past him into the entryway. The scene in the living room was predictable. Liv immediately sat bolt upright on the sofa, her expression hardening. My mother fluttered nervously near the fireplace, while my father lowered his tablet, glowering at me. Clearly they'd circled the wagons after our last meeting. We already talked about this, Ethan, my father grumbled. We said we'd figure out how to pay you back. No, I corrected him calmly. You talked at me. You justified. You deflected. Now we're going to look at the facts. I walked over to the coffee table, clearing a space amidst the magazines and coasters, and placed my tablet down, powering it on. I pulled up the first file. Let's start here, I said, my voice steady. The screen displayed a clean screenshot from my bank account. November 24th. Transfer out. $22,150.62. Destination. Account. O and M Thompson. Joint checking. I let them stare at it for a moment. Then I swiped. Now let's see where that money went, shall we? It certainly didn't sit there long. Screen after screen I presented the evidence, narrating coolly. Exhibit A. November 25th. $1,850 payment directly from your joint account to Lexus Financial Services. For the SUV, I presume. Exhibit B. November 26th. $600 charged to Stitch Fix. Premier Styling Box. Keeping up appearances, Liv? Exhibit C. November 26th through 29th. Multiple charges totaling $950.78 to DoorDash and Uber Eats. Mostly from high-end restaurants we both know I can't afford, let alone order from daily. Exhibit D, November 27th. $2,500 transfer, clearly marked Richard H. Car down payment assist. I glanced pointedly at my father, whose face had turned a blotchy red. This is ridiculous! Liv burst out, jumping to her feet. Those were necessary expenses! We had bills! Necessary? I countered, swiping to show another charge. $300 at Sephora, Liv? Was that critical infrastructure? Mark slammed his hand down on the armrest. Where the hell did you get this? Were you spying on our accounts? That's illegal! Is it more illegal than draining mine, Mark? I shot back. Your bank provides very detailed statements when requested by the primary account holder, which apparently you use my money to pay the fees for. Ethan, please, my mother pleaded, wringing her hands. Can't we just work out a payment plan? Like a family? We tried talking like a family last week, Mom, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. I placed it gently on the table beside the tablet. Actually, I have a recording of that conversation right here, remember? Their reactions were instantaneous and profound. Liv gasped, her face draining of color. Mark's jaw clenched, fury and panic warring in his eyes. My father froze, his glower turning to stunned disbelief. My mother just stared at the phone as if it were a snake. I didn't need to play much. I tapped the screen. My recorded voice filled the tense silence. So, just to be clear, Mom, you felt it was acceptable? Followed by Eleanor's flustered, incriminating response. Then, and you consider taking that amount as just borrowing. Followed by Mark's blustering justification. And finally, and you genuinely believe the primary issue here is that I didn't log out? Followed by Liv's defiant, yes, you need to take some responsibility, too. I stopped the playback. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my mother's shaky breathing. Their carefully constructed wall of denial had just been demolished. You lied, I said quietly, letting the accusation hang in the air. All of you. You justified theft. You showed zero remorse, and you tried to blame me for it. I took a steadying breath, locking eyes with each of them in turn. So, after that enlightening conversation, I took all of this. The bank statements, the transaction record showing exactly where my money went, and yes, the recording of you all confirming your stance. And I went to the Bellevue Police Department. I saw the flicker of terror in Liv's eyes, the way Mark physically recoiled. I filed a formal police report, I continued, my voice gaining strength, for financial fraud and unauthorized computer access. They have everything. An investigator has been assigned the case. They told me they would likely be in touch soon to get your side of the story. The final pieces slammed into place. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This wasn't something they could smooth over with tears or threats. This was real. This had consequences. I stepped back, observing the tableau of shock and dawning panic on their faces. The ball was no longer in my court. It was now firmly in the hands of the justice system. The silence that followed my announcement about the police report was absolute, thick with disbelief and dawning horror. Liv looked like she might actually faint, swaying slightly on her feet. Mark stood rigid, his face pale and clammy, eyes darting towards the windows as if contemplating an escape route. My father seemed to deflate, the bluster draining out of him, leaving behind a look of stunned shock. My mother just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing silently, tears beginning to stream down her face. The carefully constructed facade of their family unit had shattered in an instant. And then, cutting through the suffocating tension like a knife, came the knock. 3 sharp, heavy pounds against the front door. Not the polite rap of a neighbor, but something official, unmistakable. Every head snapped towards the sound. Liv let out a small whimper. Mark took an involuntary step backward. My parents looked at me, then at the door, then back at me, pure panic in their eyes. They knew. Ignoring their terrified gazes, I walked calmly to the front door and opened it. 2 people stood on the porch, a man and a woman, both dressed in plain clothes but radiating an air of calm authority. Badges were clipped to their belts, clearly visible. The woman, sharp-eyed and composed, spoke first. "Ethan Hayes?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Detective Miller." She introduced herself, nodding slightly. "This is Detective Chen, Bellevue Police Department Financial Crimes Unit." Her eyes flickered past me, taking in the scene in the living room. "We received the report you filed this afternoon regarding potential financial fraud." "Yes, please, come in," I said, stepping aside. They entered the house, their professional demeanor a stark contrast to the raw panic emanating from my family. Their presence immediately shifted the power dynamic in the room. They weren't here for a family chat. They were here to investigate a crime. Detective Miller addressed the room, her voice calm but carrying authority. "We are currently investigating allegations of significant unauthorized fund transfers and potential unauthorized computer access involving bank accounts belonging to Mr. Ethan Hayes." Her gaze settled on my sister and brother-in-law. "Olivia and Marcus Thompson?" Liv flinched as if struck. Mark seemed frozen to the spot. "We need to speak with both of you regarding these allegations," Detective Miller continued. "Officers, please." My mother suddenly found her voice rushing forward, hands clasped pleadingly. "This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. A family matter. Ethan is our son. They're his sister and brother-in-law." Detective Chen, the quieter of the two, responded with professional detachment. "Ma'am, while we understand family dynamics can be complicated, that doesn't negate potential criminal activity. We have a formal complaint and supporting evidence that require investigation." My father started to puff up, attempting his usual authoritative tone. "Now see here, detectives, I think this is highly irregular—" "Sir," Detective Miller interrupted smoothly but firmly, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Right now, our focus is on speaking with Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. We'd appreciate everyone's cooperation." Liv finally broke, bursting into the noisy sobs. "We didn't steal anything, I swear. He always helped us. It was practically our money, too. He makes so much. Why are you doing this, Ethan?" she wailed, turning a tear-streaked, accusing face towards me. Mark remained silent, his eyes wide, finally seeming to grasp the gravity of the situation. I stood back near the entryway, simply observing. For the first time in years, their accusations, their tears, their manipulations weren't directed at me, or at least they held no power. The detectives were unfazed, their expressions unchanging. The usual family playbook, the guilt trips, the denials, the appeals to loyalty, was utterly useless against the impassive face of the law. It was almost surreal to watch. Eleanor turned to me one last time, her voice thick with tears, her face a mask of desperation. "Ethan, please, tell them. We didn't mean any harm. We were desperate. You know we wouldn't really hurt you." I looked her straight in the eye, the years of pent-up hurt and anger crystallizing into 2 cold, hard words. "You don't." I paused, letting the weight settle. "Get to cry now, Mom." My voice was flat, devoid of heat, which somehow made it feel sharper. "You all made your choices, repeatedly. These are the consequences." Turning to Detective Miller, I gestured towards the coffee table. The tablet has the financial records I mentioned, and my phone has the audio recording. I can wait outside, or you can contact me later if you need anything further. "We have your contact information, Mr. Hayes. We'll be in touch," she replied, giving a curt nod. I picked up my tablet case, zipped my jacket, and walked out the front door without a backward glance. I didn't need to see the rest. I didn't need to hear their frantic explanations, or watch the detectives begin their formal questioning. As I stepped back into the damp evening air, leaving the chaos contained within those four walls, I felt a profound, unsettling sense of release. The burden I had carried for years had finally been set down. Driving away from my parents' house this time felt different. There wasn't the same hot rage as after the initial discovery, nor the cold calculation I'd felt before the final confrontation. Now, there was just a profound, hollow exhaustion. It wasn't triumph I felt, watching their panicked faces recede in my rearview mirror. It was more like the grim relief after surviving a natural disaster. Shaken, drained, but still standing, surveying the wreckage. I drove north again, the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers barely keeping pace with the relentless Seattle drizzle. The ferry ride across Puget Sound to Whidbey Island felt symbolic, like crossing a moat, leaving the battlefield behind. When I finally unlocked the door to the rented cabin, the silence inside was immense, a stark contrast to the emotional shrapnel I just left behind. I dropped my bag, sank onto the worn sofa, and stared out at the gray, windswept trees, finally allowing myself to just breathe. The peace, however, was short-lived. My phone, which had been mercifully quiet on the drive, began to explode. A relentless barrage of notifications lit up the screen. Missed call, Mom, 3. Voicemail, Mom, preview. Ethan, sweetheart, please call me. This has gone too far. Think about your sister. Text. Dad, preview. You have betrayed this family in the worst way. What happened to loyalty you will regret. Missed call. Liv. 7. Text. Liv. Preview. I hate you, how could you ruin my life, my kids? Text it. Mom. Preview. They're talking about charges, Ethan. Real charges. You could send your own sister to jail. Is this what you want? On and on it went. A digital onslaught of guilt, blame, and panicked pleading. I read the first few messages with a detached curiosity, recognizing the familiar patterns of manipulation. Eleanor's tearful appeals to emotion, Richard's blustering accusations of disloyalty, Olivia's venomous victim-blaming rage. But this time something was different within me. The usual pang of guilt, the ingrained sense of obligation, it wasn't there. The anger had cooled, leaving behind only a vast, empty space where my familial duty used to reside. They had burned that bridge themselves. I felt nothing but distance. I silenced the phone completely, refusing to be drawn back into their vortex of dysfunction. They needed to face the consequences of their own actions, without me cushioning the blow. Later that evening, just as a fragile quiet had begun to settle back over the cabin, the phone screen lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize, though the contact name associated with it popped up, Daniel Thompson, Mark's younger brother. We barely knew each other, exchanging maybe a dozen words total at various family holidays over the years. Curious, I opened it. The message was short, direct, and chilling. Ethan, heads up. Grapevine says Liv is spinning a story hard, telling cops and lawyer types that you knew all about the money transfers, that it was basically an informal loan you'd agreed to, maybe even encouraged. Trying to make it sound like you set them up or something. Watch your back. I stared at the message, and then let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course. Even now, with police involved and potential felonies looming, Olivia's first instinct was to lie, deflect, and attack. It wasn't even surprising anymore. It simply confirmed yet again the toxic, accountability-free zone my family operated in. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about drawing a permanent line against their corrosive behavior. I screenshotted Daniel's text and immediately forwarded it to my lawyer with a brief note. FOMGI. Expected this. Then I put the phone away again, face down, and turned back to the quiet woods outside my window. They could spin whatever tales they wanted. I had the truth, the evidence, and finally, Daniel's warning solidified my resolve. There was no turning back, no room for negotiation. First thing the next morning, I called my lawyer, my voice clipped and firm. Proceed fully, I instructed. Fraud charges. And file for restraining orders against Olivia and Marcus Thompson immediately. No contact. Taking decisive legal action felt like finally building a necessary wall after the years of leaving the gate wide open. Later that day, an email arrived from Sophia, Mark's sister. Thinking of you, the subject read. Hesitantly, I opened it. It was short, direct, and surprisingly validating. She wrote that what Mark and Liv had done was wrong, with no excuses. She apologized for how I'd been treated, not just recently, but for years. She called my actions brave and admitted that seeing me stand up had forced her to reevaluate things in her own life. She wished me well. Reading her words, brave, struck a chord. It was a perspective no one in my immediate family had ever offered. It was a small but significant affirmation from an unexpected source. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the problem. The fragile peace this brought was shattered that evening by a call from Liv. I almost ignored it, but answered out of a grim sense of finality. Hysteria poured through the note of the phone receiver before I could even speak. "Ethan, please! You have to stop this!" she sobbed, her voice cracking. "Call off the police! Drop the charges! I'm begging you, Ethan! Mark got suspended! They froze our account! We could lose the house! What about the kids?" The pleading escalated into frantic promises. "I'll do anything! Anything! I'll pay it all back! Every cent, I swear! Just make this stop!" I listened silently, the manipulative performance washing over me without effect. The tears, the desperation, real or feigned, meant nothing now. They were consequences, not leverage. When she finally paused, gasping for breath, I spoke, my voice devoid of heat, cold as the waters of the Sound outside my window. "No, Liv." A stunned silence met my refusal, broken only by her ragged inhale. "The time for anything," I stated, each word deliberate, final, "was long before you decided my life savings were yours for the taking. You made this mess. Now you get to live in it." I pressed end call before she could respond, severing the connection definitively. That door was now closed and locked. That night, the quiet in the cabin felt different, deeper. I cooked a simple meal, put on some music I hadn't heard in ages, and sat on the small porch watching the darkness settle over the trees. No phone buzzing with demands, no invisible weight of obligation pressing down, just the cool night air and the sound of my own breathing. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it felt like the beginning of peace. It felt like freedom. 3 months, 90 days since that final confrontation, since the arrival of the detectives shattered my family's delusional reality. People imagined freedom arriving like fireworks, a loud declaration. For me, peace turned out to be quiet. Profoundly, blessedly quiet. It wasn't an event. It was an absence. The absence of demanding phone calls, manipulative texts, the constant, crushing weight of expectation and guilt. It was the silence of no one needing anything from me. The fallout from my family came swiftly, though I only heard snippets through my lawyer or the occasional unavoidable update via the grapevine. The investigation into Olivia and Marcus was ongoing, complex with digital trails and conflicting stories. Thanks, Daniel, for the heads up on Liv's blame shifting. Mark had lost his job due to the investigation's fallout. Their joint account remained frozen, assets tangled in legal limbo. My parents, I heard, were trying to refinance their house, caught in the financial shrapnel, still apparently blaming outside influences or my stubbornness for tearing the family apart. They still didn't get it. Some lawyer letters proposing a private resolution arrived. My lawyer filed them away, unanswered. My mother sent long, rambling emails oscillating between tearful pleading and passive-aggressive guilt. They went unread. Maybe you can't choose your family, but you absolutely can choose how much of yourself you're willing to sacrifice, trying to keep them happy. I was done sacrificing. I'd moved, put Seattle in the rearview mirror, and found a bright, clean apartment in Portland, Oregon. A fresh start in a city where no one knew my history, where there were no accidental drop-ins or surprise visits. My boss back in Seattle, noticing my renewed focus and productivity, amazing what happens when you're not secretly juggling your sister's SUV payments, had offered me a significant promotion with a remote work option. I took it. I was sleeping through the night, eating better, breathing easier. I was no longer carrying the weight of 3 adults who refused to walk on their own. Then one morning a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a short, handwritten note on plain paper. "Ethan, I left him. You were right about all of it. I was scared, but watching what you did, seeing you refuse to back down, it gave me the courage I needed to finally walk away too. This isn't much, I know, but it's what I could manage right now. Consider it a first installment for everything you covered over the years. Things Mark never acknowledged, let alone thanked you for. But I am thanking you. Thank you for being the example I didn't know I needed. Sophia." I read the note twice, the simple words hitting me harder than any of the family drama had in months. Tears welled in my eyes. Not tears of sadness or anger, but of sheer, unexpected relief. Someone saw. Someone understood. Someone else had found the strength to break free. People sometimes ask cautiously, "Do you regret it? Burning it all down?" The answer is simple. No. What I regret is waiting so long. I regret every sleepless night, every canceled plan, every time I made myself small so they could feel big. I regret the years I spent silently enabling their entitlement. But do I regret finally standing up, drawing the line, choosing myself? Never. My therapist once asked why it took me so long to say no. I told her I thought saying no meant I didn't love them. She nodded gently. "Sometimes, Ethan," she said, "saying no is how you teach people how to respect you, and it's how you finally start respecting yourself." I haven't forgotten that. Sometimes the memories flicker. The kitchen confrontation, Liv's casual cruelty, Mark's smirk, my mother's dismissive sigh. But they fade faster now. That money wasn't just money. It was my time, my energy, my peace of mind, my boundaries. They trampled those boundaries for years like they meant nothing. Now they live with the consequences. I don't celebrate their downfall, but I celebrate my survival. So if you're reading this and you're the strong one, the responsible one, the good son or good daughter expected to give until it hurts and never complain, hear this. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to walk away, and when you do, you might be surprised. You don't lose your family, you find yourself. And that is worth everything.